Hello and welcome to episode 89 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, coming at you solo this episode. Colton can't make it today. Some back to school stuff he has to work on at his school, so it'll just be me. And we got an interesting show. We got the main theme of this show is five X factors for ASU football this year. Not necessarily the five best players, but five X factors, and I'll kind of dive into more of what that means as the show goes on. Um, Obviously didn't miss last week. Colton and I were both on vacation, and you might notice in this show a little sniffling and coughing from me. I had my first bout of COVID last week. Not fun. Wasn't terrible, but did feel it early on this week. Feel better now, but still have a lingering cough and sniffles. So if you hear that from me this episode, that's what it is. And yeah, so, but before we get into the five X factors, I want to talk about Leon Marchand at the Olympics. And look, I mean, we don't dive into swimming. That was a good little pun by me. Dive into swimming. We don't talk about swimming, ASU swimming that often on this show. As I guess I swam in high school for a little bit, but not really. As a timed sports athlete, a former runner in high school, it's not really that interesting to talk about unless you're on a like running or swimming specific type show. It's not like there's teams and all sorts of stuff like that. It's just not quite as interesting, but it's still so cool to see Leon Marchand not represent ASU. Obviously, he's representing France, but he's kind of representing ASU, and he's pretty much been the story of this Olympics. 4 gold medals, and it's just really cool to see. It's really cool to see someone from ASU balling out on the biggest stage. Unfortunately, we can't say that about James Harden when it comes to the biggest stage standpoint. And it's been a while, since Barry Bonds and Reggie Jackson were in MLB and ASU football. I guess you can maybe say that with Brandon Ayuk recently, but not to the level of Leon Marchand in France, breaking records. He looks like just a fish, literally. It's crazy how good of a swimmer he is. I think he's broken some of Michael Phelps's records, and that's if you're breaking his records, then you're doing something right. Uh, but it's just so cool to see ASU getting more national love or international love. I saw a tweet from Cronkite professor and former Valley journalist Paula Boyvin. I think I pronounced that correctly. Her tweet goes, "The Leon Marchand global appeal is real. I just told a Parisian at a sports bar that I teach at the university where Leon swim, and he responded, Arizona State. You damn right he swims at Arizona State or swam at Arizona State. Uh, it's just cool. It's cool to see. Part of me wishes he had like a giant Sparky tattooed on his chest, but uh, ASU on Instagram shared, a post of Leon Marchand giving the forks up in the pool. Like, that's awesome. And I was thinking today, like, is he the best Arizona State athlete ever? It's a tough question for one, because individual versus team sports. He's definitely on the short list though, and I think if we were doing a Mount Rushmore, he would be there. Uh, People forget how good of an athlete Curly Culp was in the '60s. Football player and wrestler, won a championship with the Kansas City Chiefs in their first Super Bowl back in the '60s. So he was on the short list. I mean, Barry Bonds. Like, I think the answer is probably still Barry Bonds uh, over Marchand, but it's a real discussion. There are definitely people I'm forgetting. I didn't really do any research before that thought came to mind. Reggie Jackson, obviously. I don't know if Terrell Suggs can really be considered the best ASU athlete of all time. I don't think anyone from football, again, even though these guys are NFL Hall of Famers, some of them, like Mike Haynes, Randall McDaniel, uh, Suggs will be there. There's a few other guys. I don't think any of them are best. I don't think anyone could make a real argument that any of them were the best athlete at the school. I just don't think there's really none of them were like considered to be the best player in their sport. Like Barry Bonds has a very legitimate argument as the best baseball player ever. You know, I don't, no one's saying that about Terrell Suggs or Mike Haynes, even though they were awesome players. So I don't think it's anyone from football. Basketball, it would be Harden, but again, James Harden is not the best bat. Like it's not James Harden. Um, Brianne January, women's basketball, very good. Not to the level of Marchand or Bond. So it's really between those two. And again, there's definitely people I'm forgetting. So if you're watching this and you're saying, why aren't you mentioning this long distance runner or the water polo play? Yeah, you got me. I didn't dig through everything. Okay. It's a school that's been around forever and there's all sorts of great athletes that have come through. So, but again, the fact that Marchand is in this position, right? I'm debating, it's either between him or Barry Bonds. Like, it's a good place to be for him. It's a good place to be. I think we'll see him again at the next Olympics too. I don't think he won't be, fresh out of ASU at that point. But it's just really, really cool to see. And, maybe I don't really think it leads to any huge impact. That's kind of always the next step in this, right? I don't think it leads to any huge impact. I mean, look, let's use football for an example. Patrick Mahomes went to Texas Tech. Uh, he is either the best or second best quarterback to ever play the game. We can debate between him and Brady. There are legitimate cases on both sides. He's the best quarterback in the NFL right now. Does it mean Texas Tech is just going to be this killer program? No, not really. Look at Brady, Michigan football after Brady. Like Michigan football for a lot of my time as a fan was good, not great, or not that good. So, they were always behind Ohio State for a long time. So I think it's very like, I don't think it means that much in terms of like future success, but it's just really cool to see. And I'm really happy for Leon Marchand. I'm happy for the other ASU swimmers. This is an interesting tweet from Braden Keith. He is a swimming reporter, media person. I'll share the screen right now. Let's get this open. Share the screen, please. This one. All right. You see this tweet? Oh, okay. Here we go. Braden Keith writes for Swim Swam News. It's a swimming thing. This is from Thursday. So this is not from today, as you can see, because Marchand only has 3 golds. He won another gold on Friday. So Marchand has 4 golds by himself. But this is the tweet. United States of Arizona State. USA of ASU. Swimmers who trained with the Bowman Beam crew, and Herbie Beam is currently the coach now that Bowman is in Texas. In Tempe, at least through March, some longer. ASU swimmers, Leon Marchand, 3 golds. Hubert Kos, 1 gold. Ryan Held, 1 gold. Reagan Smith, 2 silvers. Drew Kibler, 1 silver. Simone Manuel, 1 silver. And Ilya Karhun, 1 bronze. So that's 10 medals as of Thursday, August 1st. Again, this is not today that I'm recording or that this tweet is from. But as of freaking yesterday, Arizona State by itself had 10 medals just from ASU swimmers. That is so cool. Now, when you juxtapose it with the fact that Bob Bowman just left for Texas, it's a little less cool. But then you mention, hey, at least he won a national championship on the way out. You know, it's just really cool to see. And it probably won't continue to this level without Bowman. But I mean, the guy the second in command, Herbie Beam, it's a good replacement. So really happy for Marchand, happy for all of these Sun Devils, Carhoon, Manuel, Reagan Smith's been really good. Hubert Kos, I think I'm pronouncing these names correctly as I can. So it's really cool. And I just want to give them some recognition as we kind of, obviously this show is primarily football and men's basketball. But I still want to give them a shout out because ASU sports has been in the gutter recently. I don't know if you know this. If you're an ASU fan, it's been a pretty rough 2 or 3 years. Let's go three. It's been 3. Yeah, it's been 3 years since the investigation story broke. So yeah, I'd say let's go 3 years. But a pretty rough stretch, and some real legitimate, really high end success for this program is really good to see, and it makes me happy. And so, the only French word I know is bonjour, so I'm not even going to say. I'm just going to say go Leon Marchand, and keep kicking ass over there in Paris. All right, switching over to football. Camp has begun. We're getting our first look at the quarterback competition. Seems like I think Sam Levitt's done about as good as I expected him to do, and it seems like Jeff Sims is uh, within reaching distance of him, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say like hot on his tail, but he is within. He's making it a conversation. It looks like. And so he's delivered a few passes. I think when you see Jeff Sims, like this dude's an athlete. Like Jeff Sims is, I think one thing we can say for sure is Jeff Sims is getting on the field this year. Now, ideally, that would be after ASU, is blowing teams out, and he comes in, halfway through the fourth quarter when ASU is up 35-17 on some team. Maybe that wouldn't be close enough or that would be too close for a backup to come in. I don't know. You get the point. They're up 41-10 on someone midway through the fourth quarter, and Jeff Sims comes in. That would be great. That's probably not going to happen anytime. Maybe one game the ASU blows someone out like that, but probably not. So anyway, he could come in for injury, or my main point on this is he could come in specific down and distances as a wildcat quarterback. I mean, even last year when he had some really bad moments as a passer, he still had, a few 50-yard touchdown runs, and not everyone can do that. I know Sam Levitt is a better athlete than people might think. And I saw that in the spring game, but I don't think he has quite the athleticism of Jeff Sims. And so that could come in handy. I mean, we kind of saw last year that in the UCLA game that Dillingham is prepared to kind of switch up the game plan on a week by week basis, or at least for 1 week. And if Sam Levitt is injured, or if they're facing I don't know, maybe they're just facing on the road at Oklahoma State or Kansas State, and you want to throw off those teams, and maybe you just go with Jeff Sims so much more in the game, and it's a new wrinkle that they weren't prepared for. I don't know, but I think that he's not just going to be like, I think he's going to be more than just a typical backup, just due to his athleticism, his running ability. And I mean, if you have him in there and, the defense thinks it's going to be a quarterback run or an option or something, and then eventually he throws a pass to like a wide open tight end or something, that could be a great time to use him as well. So I'm happy about that. I mean, when you have Bourget as your third quarterback, that is such a good place to be. I mean, even if he was the backup, honestly, like that's a really good place to be as a program. And look, we've seen in college football that like sometimes the backup comes in and it's not even like a converse. It's such a huge drop off. I think kind of U of A might have that issue. I mean, Colorado could, what quarterback is like, oh, let me transfer to Colorado in 2024 when Shador is the key to their success and the coach's son. Like, who knows who Colorado's backup is, right? I think it's good that ASU has like legitimate backups. Because we think this offensive line will be better than it was last year. It almost certainly guaranteed to be better. It's not going to be like the Washington offensive line of last year and the Michigan offensive line of last year or whatever. Like, it's not going to be some dominant unit that Sam Levitt never gets touched. So there's always the risk of quarterback injury. And if that does happen, or if Sam Levitt doesn't play well, or whatever the case may be, you can look at Jeff Sims and be like, okay, like if we get him, really prepared at a certain handful of plays or whatever it is, he can go out and execute and lead us to a win that weekend, you know? So, oh, excuse me. Anyway, but as much as the quarterback battle was interesting and crucial for this team, obviously, I'm not going to have one of the quarterbacks in the X factors. I think it's just it's just too obvious, right? Like, and of course, the quarterback's an X factor when it's going to be a new quarterback and it's the quarterback, right? Like, it's the most important position on the team. So obviously, it's an X factor, but I'm kind of just taking it out of the equation. I was thinking of putting kicker as an X factor as well, but that's boring. And we don't know who the kicker is going to be. There's Ian Hershey's still on the team. There's some other guys. Obviously, Parker Lewis transferred in, so we'll see how that shakes out. That's going to be could be really important in some of these games for ASU this year. But again, it's still the kicker, and so I'm not going to spend too much time diving into that. But there are some key guys who, again, not necessarily the going to be the best players on this team. Like, it's not Cam Scadaboo as the X factor, or center Leaf Fautanu as the X factor, or Prince Dorba and Clayton Smith, both guys who produced last year from the edge, or a guy like Shamari Simmons who played a lot last year at safety. It's not going to be kind of the guys going in. It's like, okay, like we know Scadaboo is going to be good. Even like a DeCarlos Brooks, we know DeCarlos Brooks is going to be good. More the you got a few transfers, you got a few guys who came in last year, and I think for the most part these are going to be guys at pretty important positions. So I'll just kind of run through it. I'll run through. I'll start on offense here. So it's not going to be a running back. Scadaboo, we know what we're getting from him. Brooks, we saw limited last year. Like, this guy's a legit running back. And then the new guys, you have Alton McCaskill, Rayleigh Brown. Those guys, we don't totally know what we're getting, but like we know that they're really talented, specifically Brown. And McCaskill produced a bunch at Houston 2 years ago. So with him, it's not just with that group in general. I mean, Kyson Brown was really good last year, and then Jason Brown, 4-star recruit. Like, that room, I'm just not that worried about, right? Like, so it's not going to be a running back, not going to be a quarterback, not going to be a tight end. I think getting Shimon Mateer from Colorado/Cincinnati is going to be really helpful. He didn't come in with a lot of buzz, but he scored like 5 touchdowns last year. Big body athlete. Like, I think he's going to contribute for this team, and I'm not really that worried about it. I think Moans is a great position coach. You add in Marcuston Douglas, who's just enormous. He'll be helpful as well. So it's not going to be tight end, but it will be wide receiver. And we are starting with our first X factor. Wow. Thanks for not working. ASU football website. Let's see here. It's going to be Troy O'Meary. So I don't have his Sun Devil page pulled up. I'll just get to him on ESPN. O'Meary, 6'4" wideout. He was I'm waiting for the internet. Waiting for the internet to load. Before that happens, I think I don't think O'Meary is going to be the best wide receiver on this team. I just think from what we've heard out of camp and what this player produced 2 years ago at Colorado, like, it's going to be Jordan Tyson. Like, Jordan Tyson is like the best wide receiver on this team. It's just that he's not an I think he's just so much of a known commodity heading into this year, because we saw what he did at Colorado, where he was named the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year in 2022. And then you just saw at the spring game, his speed is obvious. And all the reports coming out of camp, there's just so much to go off of. So it's not Jordan Tyson, but Troy O'Meary is definitely, to me, the biggest X factor at the wide receiver position. And the reason why is because he has the length that a lot of guys don't have. He is, here we go. Let's share the screen. There we go. 6'4", 215. And he actually did contribute a good amount last year. 20 catches for 223 yards and 3 touchdowns. Touchdowns were kind of weirdly distributed throughout the year. He had one in the first game in the year and one in the Territorial Cup. I'm forgetting what his other touchdown was. It was okay, against Colorado midway through the year. So, he's an important player just because you can't just have Jordan Tyson be your only threatening wide receiver and that's it. And what I love about O'Meary is that he offers uh, a different complement to Tyson, right? Tyson's a little shorter, like a 5'11", not short, but he's not like a tall wide receiver, not like rangy. He's more of a deep threat, underneath, probably get some screens type player. Whereas O'Meary, he can be a deep threat as well. Had a 31-yard catch against Arizona, 30 catch against Wazoo, 22-yarder against Oregon. So he's not like a super burner, but he's a good jump ball guy. And that's just it's it's the old saying of like you want to build a wide receiver core like a basketball starting lineup and have guys that kind of fill different body types and roles. And Troy O'Meary is the best big body receiver on this team. There were a ton of reports out of spring ball that he was really lighting it up and really looked impressive. And if this team's gonna overachieve and potentially go to a bowl game, they're going to need him to be a real contributor. And I think it's encouraging that most of his production, all these games where he had 2 catches, a lot of this, came at the end of the year. So we came on as the season progressed. It's kind of the opposite of Guillory. Guillory pretty much had the same yardage total, had 1 touchdown and not 3. Most of his production came earlier in the year. And I think Guillory is kind of an X factor too. I'm just basing it off of what I heard from, just saw on, social media about reports coming out of spring ball. And it's clear that O'Meary really made a name for himself, just really played well. And yeah, they're going to need it. They're going to need it from him this year. So obviously, I think Guillory can improve as well in his second year in FBS football. But I just think O'Meary is more important, and he produced more at the end of the year. So, I mean, look, 5 catches, 57 yards against Oregon. You're probably going up against an NFL corner or a fringe NFL corner in that game. That's a real legitimate production game when you're how many options, like that game was a disaster, but at least he, 5 catches for 57 yards, he could hang in that game. And that's really important. I mean, look, his 2 best games came against better teams he played, right? Like 3 catches, 38 yards, and a touchdown against U of A. That was the 3rd best team ASU played last year, and they're going to play him again this year, right? So that's what I like about it. And I mean, even in game 1 of last year, his 3-yard touchdown catch against Southern Utah was a kind of an acrobatic play in the end zone, and he had to go up and get the ball. So him continuing on that track will be very important for this team, and I think he's more than capable of having a really good second year here. So uh, O'Meary is our first X factor for ASU. Second X factor, we are heading on to the offensive line, where I have 2 guys for this, actually. I'm kind of cheating. It's a mix between Max Ihenacher, played a few games last year in relief. Big guy, obviously, 6'5", 315. He was one of the better according to ASU's, player page for him, he was one of the better JUCO offensive linemen. I'm just scrolling down here to find another name that is going to compete with him. But Ian Atcher, he's a real option to start one of the tackle spots. And I say one of them. I went into this exercise thinking that Emmett Boley was going to just be the right tackle again, but they had Emmett Boley practice at left tackle on the first day of camp this year. So are they considering, do they think, hey, Emmett Boley's our best tackle, so let's just put him at left tackle? Or, hey, he's our best left tackle, or he's our best tackle overall. We know that he's pretty good at right tackle. Let's just keep him there. So I think with Boley, I'm not worried about him on either side. I kind of would just prefer that he stays at right tackle, just he's good there. But if they put him at left tackle because they trust him more and he's older, I think he's like 23, then I'd be fine with that too. I'm not the offensive lineman coach, so that would be fine with me. But the point is that like Boley, I'm not worried about him. Whereas, I mean, with Ian Atcher and this other guy, Bram Walden, who came in last year, former 4-star recruit, he's got the size, 6'4", 305, 4-star, again, like I said, in high school, went to Oregon. One of these guys needs to be good. One of them. Whoever it is, whatever, like just looking to put the best players on the field. But having two, I'll just say solid, competent tackles this season for ASU with Boley and whoever else it is, whether it's Walden or Ian Atcher or potentially Jalen Clem, who's going to miss sometime in camp due to a health issue. Having one of those two guys start and obviously start, but play well in that role is going to be so huge. We saw last year, too early in the year, just how screwed you are when you have bad tackle play. And that was due to injury, right? When you have Glass and Boley go down in the second game of the year, I just don't think can be overstated how much that threw off just the offensive plan for ASU football. There's no way around it. And obviously Rashada went down as well. Having one of Bram Walden or Max Ian Atcher, having one of those guys step up is just so critical. I mean, just so critical for this team. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see who gets first team reps. It was interesting that Dillingham, he made a pre-fall camp comment that there were only 3 guys who had locked in starting roles entering fall camp, and those would be Lee Fautanu at center. I think Lee Fautanu is probably I think there's a good chance he might be the highest player drafted off ASU in this upcoming NFL draft. Now, that could be in like the 5th round or something, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I've seen some like draft accounts kind of pump his tires a bit, so we'll see with him. But again, he's the starting center. There's not really any debate about it. He was your most consistent offensive lineman last year. Then you have Ben Coleman at left guard. And I think it's pretty interesting how he got injured at last year's fall camp of 2023, missed last season. I think in retrospect, that was a much bigger injury than we kind of realized entering the season. So having him locked and loaded, ready to go, hopefully, knock on wood, I think it's telling that he is Coleman, that he is a legitimate starter entering this season, according to Dillingham. So 2 of your 5 offensive line positions are locked in. It it's almost certain that Boley is going to be one of the starting tackles. And then it looks like Sean Na'a, who got a good chunk of playing time last year as a freshman, he'll be your right guard. So you have both guards locked in, Faltanu center, Boley at one of the tackles, and then likely Ian Atcher or Bram Walden. They're in the running now just because Jalen Clem is out for the beginning of camp. You know, if you can get that offensive line really, really connected and gelled, like that just changes so much about this team. I mean, if you watched it last year, like some of the games they just had no chance. Um, the margin for error was so thin with bad offensive lines or offensive lines that were just, you know, duct taped together. That's what it felt like for good chunks of last year. If you can avoid that, and maybe only one of these guys gets injured or something along those lines, like that would be huge. And I'll kind of wrap up this offensive line thought with the fact that it seems like your interior offensive line is kind of a strength. I mean, how often, not just ASU football, how often, I'm a Seahawks fan, Colton's an Eagles, I guess he could say this as an Eagles fan, but like most football teams I follow or follow tangentially, like interior offensive line is almost never a strength, right? It's for whatever reason, like it's difficult, and your defensive tackles are more athletic than they've ever been. You're dealing with crazy blitzes and all sorts of stuff. Like it's a physical position, obviously. But I think it's really like that's very good for ASU that you have two. I think Faltanu and Coleman are both seniors, and then Naa is a sophomore, but he's experienced and athletic. Everything you hear about him from the coaching staff is positive. So having those three guys in there paving the way, I mean, that's going to be really important for this team. And this is a team that needs to focus. This needs to be a run first team on 100%. So, and having a good interior offensive line really helps pave the way for those guys. So hopefully Ian Atcher, Walden, one of those two guys, Walden's a former 4-star recruit out of high school. Ian Atcher is a former highly rated JUCO guy. Hopefully one of those two really works out. Up next, speaking of the interior defensive line, or interior of the line of scrimmage, that is, Jeff Clark transfers in from Louisville. Interesting career. He started all 13 games at Louisville last year, but he didn't really have that much production. So I'm going to look him up on ESPN right now. I don't know how much information they'll give. There he is. Prior to being at ASU, he played 3 seasons at Georgia State, 9 career sacks, which top 10 in program history. That's crazy. 20 tackles for loss over his career. And then in 2022, the year before he transferred to Louisville, he had 4.5 sacks, 39 tackles. That's pretty dang good for a defensive tackle, right? Little undersized, 285, not, 6'1", not the biggest guy in the world. That's why he was at Georgia State. But when you lose BJ Green, it's obviously incredibly important to have someone come in and do a pretty good replacement. And I couldn't find this. It was a Pro Football Focus college tweet of like the best returning defensive tackles. And you saw BJ Green on there, which was annoying, but you also saw Jeff Clark. And so when Jeff Clark arrived, I believe he had some legitimate like other Power 5 schools, Power 4 schools interest in him, those being, I believe it was North Carolina and Michigan State. So not just totally bottom rung, Indiana and I don't know, Vanderbilt going after him. It was, kind of the same schools as ASU's level. So, I mean, if he can plug up that interior with CJ Fight, who it's kind of crazy that ASU is rolling with a sophomore, true sophomore, short, 6 foot, 6'1" defensive tackle. And it's not any big deal because, like Fautanu and like Coleman, Fight was the third guy who was locked in as a starter entering camp. And that just speaks, I mean, apparently he's just one of these guys that just crushes it in the weight room. And look, that having two shorter defensive tackles could actually be a really good thing for ASU. Lower to the ground, harder to block. A guy like Fight is super athletic, but you can pair Clark and Fight in the middle. That's a pretty good defensive tackle combo for what's supposed to be a bad team. I think it's going to be that's going to make it just much more difficult to run the ball on ASU. And I mean, look, Ryan Ward's a good defensive coordinator, as we saw last year. You have both of those guys in the mix in the middle. Again, it helps you control the line of scrimmage to a degree. And if you can control the line of scrimmage in, I don't know, half the games you play in, that's a really good sign for ASU. And I just think that Jeff Clark, if he can be good this year, again, it's a huge X factor for ASU. And we saw it last year. Again, his stats don't pop off the page with, 6 tackles or 14 total tackles, 0 sacks with Louisville. But I trust the Pro Football Focus guys, and I trust the contextual evidence of Michigan State and North Carolina wanting him and having him, come in for a transfer visit, right? This guy was clearly a productive player, someone that coaches wanted, and he came to ASU, and that's a big deal for ASU. Because I don't really know. I know there's other, you got in Zach Swanson from Texas who transferred in, and Tristan Monday, I believe, transferred in from Wisconsin last year. But there's some guys I'm forget it's not quite as loaded as some of these other positions. So really good. Jeff Clark is a guy that can really have an impact on this team, even if he doesn't have an impact on the stat sheet. That's another thing to be mindful of. Sometimes you're the defensive tackle plugging holes in the run game. It doesn't lead to a tackle, doesn't lead to anything, but it could lead to some other guy tackling running back for a 1-yard gain instead of a 3-yard gain. And that adds up over a game and over a season. So looking for the best from Mr. Jeff Clark. This guy, Keyshawn Elliott, could have a big year this season. He's one of the 2 guys that comes in from New Mexico State, along with Miles Ghost Rouser. And I think this guy, I just think he's really well positioned to do well this year. I mean, you look at him, 6'3", 225, had 59 solo tackles, 111 tackles, 59 solo tackles. That's a lot of solo tackles for a middle linebacker or a linebacker. And I mean, 111 tackles on a New Mexico State team that was good last year. They probably, if that New Mexico State team played ASU last year, I guess both teams got blown up by Fresno State. So who knows for sure, but they could have easily beaten ASU last year, depending on what time of the year they played and stuff like that. Just looking at his game log, he got more and more action as the year went on, and that led to more and more wins for New Mexico State. 11 tackles. He has, let's see, 1, 2, 3 games with 10 tackles, and then 3 more with 9 tackles. Sack, forced fumble. A sack and a half in a game that you win by 3 points, that's incredibly impactful sacks, right? And just the way this guy I saw some interviews of his coaches last year of just how tough he was. Obviously, you want that as a linebacker. He was also, recruited on the transfer market by, I believe, UCF and Kansas. So again, schools of your caliber wanted this guy, and he came to you. I just think this guy could be a really really important part of the defense next year because linebacker, on paper, it's a position that you don't really have big names coming back. You still have Romney coming back, and you still have McCullough, who I think he played really well last year, McCullough, but he's a little undersized. Adding Keyshawn Elliott and then also Jordan Crooks, who transferred in from Arkansas, and Dillingham. Maybe I should have gone with Crooks in this position, but I just think that Elliott has higher potential, just a bigger guy, and just coming under the radar. We don't know. I mean, we kind of don't know how good he can be, but I think these two guys coming from New Mexico State, like it's hard to just overstate how bad of a G5 program New Mexico State has been in the entire time that I've followed college football. And for them to go 10, what's their final record last year? 10-3, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, 10-3 for a bad program. You beat the crap out of Auburn on the road. I get that it's clear that Auburn just wasn't totally focused or motivated for that game, but they still, New Mexico State still beat them by 3 touchdowns in Auburn, Alabama. Like that's an incredible accomplishment. And Elliott and Rouser had a lot to do with that. You hold that team to 10 points. Hugh Free's offense, like I mean, they made Liberty work in both of their games against them. I'm just really excited about both these guys, but Keyshawn Elliott is number one, and I think there's a reality at the end of the year where this guy is the best defensive player on your team at ASU. So really excited what we can see from him. Would love to. I mean, if he can get after the quarterback too, like that adds a whole nother dimension to his game, and he's got the frame to contribute in an outside linebacker-ish type role as well at 6'3", 225. So really looking forward for number 44 to make some plays this year for the Sun Devils. Okay. Jeff Clark, Keyshawn Elliott. Let's see if I missed anything. 30th in FBS, 11 total tackles. First 10. Okay, so this is my point. First 10-win season for New Mexico State since 1960. That is, oh my gosh, my math is wrong. 50. It would be 50. No, 63 years ago from last year. 6th bowl appearance ever. Conference USA championship game. Second team Conference USA last year. 10 tackles for loss, huge. 6 pass breakups. Played 930 snaps on defense that year, most of any player in the conference, and 16th most out of any FBS player. Played 12 games as a true freshman. I mean, yeah, this guy just hey, cousin of Linval Elliott. So that's pretty cool too. Great athlete, helped win Missouri State championship. Like this guy's kind of got it all. And so I'm kind of surprised he's even made it to ASU, but he has, and really excited to see how he can contribute. Next guy's going to be a kind of a familiar name, but not a familiar name on the field, Xavier Alford. And the reason I go with him is just because he's been a captain of the team. He went to Big 12 media days, but you just haven't seen him because he was forced to sit out last year. This is such a funny little line they have in here. Was forced to sit out the season due to NCAA's 2-time transfer rules, which were inevitably lifted after the 23-24 athletics campaign. They're just adding it in like, hey, like he was the last victim of this stupid rule. Proved to be an invaluable resource on scout team as a result, giving the Sun Devils a proven D1 talent to practice against on offense. 2022, he out for the year with injuries. He had been at, let's see. He started out at Texas because he is originally from just outside of Houston, so it makes sense. Then transferred to USC. And he had, let's see, appeared in 11 games, started twice, and had 3 interceptions for 2021 USC. So ASU played against him in 2021, the last time they beat USC. Uh, I just if this guy, you just hear the way the media talks about him. I think that's kind of right why he's on here. You hear the way the media, the people that cover this team, talk about Xavier and Alford. I mean, the fact that he had 3 picks the last time he was out on the field for a full year, that's impressive. That's more than anyone ASU had last year. If he can if you can just have a really top end group of safeties with him and Shamari Simmons, and I'll throw Ghost Rouser in there as well. Again, it just shores up your defense. You don't want to have bad safety play. Like safety, it's weird because in the NFL, they're one of the lower paid positions. But when you have bad safeties, it is so noticeable, and it's just like candy for the opposing offense. And I think with him and Simmons and Rouser, like I'm really happy about the potential of what those guys can show next year. So I'll have to listen to this podcast with Brad Denny. Always listen to Speak of the Devils. After you listen to my podcast, of course. So excited to see what Alfred can prove. And I think just to wrap up this list, like the reason why I picked those 5 guys, or 6, but 5 positions, being O'Meary, Walden / Ian Atcher, Jeff Clark, Keyshawn Elliott, and Xavier Alford, is because they're mostly unknowns, but aside from O'Meary, but I think there's just so much potential with O'Meary. They're mostly unknowns, but there's clear reason to think that these guys can be very productive first year with the team, right? With O'Meary, again, he's not his first year, so it's not 100%. Doesn't apply to every player the exact same. O'Meary, you saw him; he was one of the leading receivers on last year's team. Produced at the end of the year, is going to most likely be your second best receiver this season. Ian Atcher and Walden, both just big dudes and have the frame, have the recruiting background, I guess, to reasonably think that they can contribute on this team. Clark, contributed to a 10-win Louisville team last year, was wanted by other Power 4 programs, should be one of the starters on the defensive tackle unit. Just going to be an important player for this team if they want to succeed. Elliott, again, produced for a New Mexico State team that won 10 games. Just an athletic guy. I just think he's going to be a big contributor to the Sun Devil defense. And then Alford, again, someone who has just been one of the better players on the ASU team the last few years, hasn't been able to play, produced at USC 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago at this point. So I just think if all of those guys, or 3 of the 5, really play well, then that's just really good news for the Sun Devils. Like, again, having Scadaboo played well for ASU last year, and they weren't a good team, right? Let's just say Jordan Tyson and Elijah Badger for this. If Jordan Tyson could have been on the team in place of Elijah Badger last year, and they still wouldn't have been that good. If, let's just say, Elijah Badger or Tyson had the same level of statistics as Badger had last year, like it wouldn't have, like, they still would have been a bad team, right? Lee Fautanu played well. Guess what? It didn't matter that much because there was just so much instability surrounding him. So that's why I'm not just saying, oh, these are the best players on the team. I'm saying these guys, if these guys have success, it's going to be so crucial because it just plugs these holes and adds playmakers in certain positions and stuff. So it's really important. A few guys that I didn't do anyone from the cornerbacks. I just think ASU has a ton of corners, and I'm not really worried about that position that much. I'm just not, like, especially last year, like they didn't get burned by Washington deep. The only time they got burned last year deep, from what I can recall off the top of my head, was just a mental coverage bust in the Colorado game. And, stuff happens on a football field, but I don't think that like plays to, and I guess in the Oregon game, they got burned a few times by Troy Franklin. So, and again, against Arizona. So I am forgetting some bad moments. But overall, I'm just not that worried about the corners. I mean, everything coming out of camp about Keith Abney has been impressive. Javon Robinson, the transfer from Wazoo, has looked good at camp from what I've seen. And then, I mean, you still have like LaTerrence Welsh, you still have Keontae Brett. You just have so many. Oh, yeah. Told you I was still getting over the cough. Just to wrap that point up about the corners, I'm just not worried about that position too much. The only guy that now that I kind of walked through the X factors that I omitted is probably Shimon Mateer, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I was looking through some posts on social media from some Colorado Buffaloes fans that were pretty excited about him coming to Boulder. And obviously, that same level of excitement isn't, quite the same on ASU social medias, plural. Oh my gosh. Uh, but let me share my screen again real quick. Okay. You got Shimon Mateer. First, let's go to his. Stop. No, 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 no. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. So this is his production last year at Cincinnati with Emory Jones as his quarterback. Okay, not the best college quarterback of all time. I'll just say that. 5 touchdowns. That is more touchdowns than Jalen Conner scored last year with ASU. Some of that is just in offensive line instability. Like I'm not trying to say that he's a better player than Jalen Conyers, but he's not that much worse of a player than Jalen Conyers, right? You just look at his game by game production. Okay, he had 1 catch against Houston, but it didn't affect them because they still won. 2 catches, 7 yards, no catches. Okay, but he did have a carry for 27 yards. And again, if you're a tight end taking off on a 27-yard run, you've got some athleticism, man. Like that is an athletic play. So that's a key little. I think that's just an interesting little stat. I mean, I don't think they're going to be giving Matei or end rounds or anything like that, but it shows his athleticism. Next game, Oklahoma, 3 catches, 50 yards. Pretty good against Oklahoma. They're NFL players on that defense. Against BYU, 3 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sign me up for a few games like that from Mateer this year. Next game at Iowa State, they lose 30-10. He scores the only touchdown of the game for them, 4 catches, 43 yards. Lose to Baylor in a shootout, 5 catches, 50 yards. Not much production in these next 2 games against former American athletic foes for the Bearcats last year. Then closes the year, 3 catches, 37 yards, 2 touchdowns. This is a pretty productive player, and I think his yardage can really go up this year. It's just clear that he has the athleticism to get open and make plays. So he's probably our honorable mention for X factors. And okay, you got some. I just wanted to do a little Twitter search of his name just to see kind of what we're getting. So you have some practice. I mean, good job, man. You're blocking a blocking sled. Devil's Digest, just hyping him up. But then you go back. Crib made 305 Sports, so from a Miami based. Jeez. Oof. Not quite out of the woods just yet with this disease, I guess. I have tested negative. Anyway, ready to take over Boulder. Hyping him up, showing his highlights down here. 240 likes, 39 retweets. As we know, Coach Prime and the Buffaloes have a lot of casual fans, and I think if Mateer, if he had just stayed at Colorado, he would be getting so much more hype. I think that's kind of the point I'm getting to. He's at ASU, so he's not going to get that same level of hype, but he still could be just as good of a player. And so that's what I'm excited about. Um, he's been absolutely cooking on the transfer portal, the number 5 tight end in the portal. Well, he's not there anymore. Apparently, he was at Colorado spring ball for like 10 days. So I don't have any reporting on this, but probably got annoyed with how it was run at Colorado. You just got more. See, like they're just hyping him up. And my point is just like, I mean, the 1.7K likes on this, 163 retweets. I like that he got all this hype when he was going to Colorado. He again in the EA Sports video game, he was one of the higher rated players, which again, who knows what that really means, but it shows that he is well regarded among your average college football fans who you know interact with Mateer. And he was very hyped. See, like he's got yeah, so the Buffs fans didn't really like that he's left and all this. So um I just think he can be a big player this year to wrap it up with Shimon Mateer. And I don't know how to pronounce his first name. I keep thinking it's like Michael Jackson, like Shimon. Uh I'm sure he's gotten that one before. So we'll see. But really looking forward to seeing him out there this year for the Sun Devils. So those are the X factors that I've come up with this year. And I hope that they all do well because I'm an ASU fan. So there we go. Not really much else to go over. I saw while we were on the break that Hurley went on John Rothstein's podcast and kind of just talked about the upcoming season. It was all kind of stuff that we knew, so nothing too big there. But he mentioned that they had 5 or 6 times more NIL money than they had last year. Again, that makes sense just based on who they've been able to bring in. So, not too much new with ASU basketball, other than I did see that Josan Sinoon was in at practice. So it's good to see him getting better at the Weather Up Center. Only other thing I want to touch on, ASU baseball announced its transfers. We've talked about that. That'll be more of a bigger deal once baseball season comes around, but not really much else from there. The only other thing that I saw that I found interesting, oh, here it is. So home opener for ASU hockey has been scheduled. It is 3:30 p.m. on October 12th, I believe, against Michigan. And the reason, oh no, October 11th. It's a Friday. So Friday, October 11th, ASU hosts Michigan, 3:30 p.m. They host them again that following, that next Saturday at 5 p.m. Michigan hockey is a huge, some of these Big Ten hockey schools don't actually have that big of a impact, like Ohio State hockey or I think like I don't know, like how big is Michigan State hockey? Like I don't really know. Whereas like Michigan hockey, huge, like has had very highly picked guys in the NHL draft recently. Minnesota hockey, obviously, but that's a really big brand to have in Tempe, and I'm excited about that game. And what makes that game even better is it coincides with ASU hosting Utah that night. So there's a chance that you could go see ASU hockey host Michigan, and then after that game's over, walk over 100 feet to Sun Devil Stadium and see ASU versus Utah. Hopefully, those are both wins for ASU. I think the hockey game is probably a more realistic win than the football game against Utah. But I really like how that's scheduled, and I think that should just be just a really fun home opener for ASU, and it signals just more growth for this program as they enter the NCHC. All right, next episode be next week sometime. Probably just talk more about football. I wonder if by then a quarterback starter will be announced. Last year they kind of they kind of had it go on for a little bit. So I don't know how that'll work out. The difference is last year, Rashada was a true freshman competing against Bourget and Drew Pine. This year, it's you have Sam Levitt, who's I think he's a true sophomore, or I think he's a redshirt freshman, but he does have experience in camp and some in-game experience. And then obviously versus Jeff Sims, who has a ton of experience, not all good experience, but a ton of experience, and of course Bourget, who also has a lot of experience. So maybe the fact that they're all a little bit more experienced makes this an easier competition to decide. I don't know, but I I have a feeling that Dillingham's going to want to get a starter locked in, and Marcus Arroyo. I mean, Arroyo wants Levitt to be the starter. Like Levitt was brought in by Arroyo, and a lot of the reason Rashada left is kind of because Levitt was brought in by Arroyo. So uh, Levitt is definitely the favorite, but Jeff Sins is good enough to make it a battle. And so we'll see how that all shakes out, you know, by when probably Thursday of next week when we record. It's tough to get it nailed down all the time, but by the next time we record, uh, it'll be interesting to see if the quarterback battle has been decided. So we shall see about that. All right. Thank you for listening. Again, we're part of the College Huddle podcast network. You can find them at the College Huddle or College Huddle on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. They do a lot of great work. We have a ton of partner podcasts with them, and this is Colton and I, but we should probably partner up with another one of them before the season starts to talk about our expectations and stuff. So for the season and joining a new league. So watch out for that. And then as always, please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, go Devils.